It looks like I'm singing for you, bro. Pijanaba Lava Irivarada Pijanaba Irivarada Sudananda Rajanara Jana Jasudanandana Rajajanara Jana Yamunatira Vanaja Yamunatira Vanaja Jayarada Madhava Jabiha Jayarada Madhava Jabiha Vijanava Irivarada Vijanava Irivarada Sudana Chandaran Sudana Chandaran Tira Anaja Tira Adava Jabiha Jayaradam Adava Jabiha Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Good morning, devotees. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 4, verse number 16. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tujayam Udirayat Nasta Preshavadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Bhakti Bhavati Naistuki. Okay. Now the verse. Again, unlike most of the Bhagavatam, this is spoken in prose, not in verse. Yadyapisva viditam sakala dharmam brahmam guhyam brahmanay darshitam argina samadhibir upaya janatam anushashasa. Synonyms. Yadyapi, although, swaviditam, known by him, sakala dharmam, which includes all different types of occupational duties, brahmam, Vedic instructions, guhyam, very confidential, brahmanai, by the Brahmans, darshita margina, by the path showed, sama adibi, sama, dhamma, titiksha, controlling the mind, controlling the senses, practicing tolerance, and so on. Payai, by the means, janatam, the people in general, anushashasa, he ruled over. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Although Lord Rishabhadev knew everything about confidential Vedic knowledge, which includes information about all types of occupational duties, he still maintained himself as a kshatriya and followed the instructions of the Brahmins as they related to mind control, sense control, tolerance, and so forth. Thus, he ruled the people according to the system of Varnashram Dharma, which enjoins that the Brahmins instruct the Kshatriyas and the Kshatriyas administer to the state through the Vaishyas and Sudras. Purport. Although Rishabhadev knew all the Vedic instructions perfectly well, he nonetheless followed the instructions of the Brahmins in order to perfectly maintain the social order. The Brahmins would give advice according to the Shastras, and all the other castes would follow. The word Brahma means perfect knowledge in all activities, and this knowledge is very confidentially described in the Vedic literatures. Men trained perfectly as Brahmins should know all Vedic literature, and the benefit derived from this literature should be distributed to the general populace. The general populace should follow the perfect Brahmin. In this way, one can learn how to control the mind and senses and thus gradually advance to spiritual perfection. The verse again. Although Lord Rishabhadev knew everything about confidential Vedic knowledge, which includes information about all types of occupational duties, he still maintained himself as a kshatriya and followed the instructions of the Brahmins as they related to mind control, sense control, tolerance, and so forth. Thus, he ruled the people according to the system of Varnashram Dharma, which enjoins that the Brahmins instruct the Kshatriyas and the Kshatriyas administer to the state through the Vaishyas and Shudras. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurumilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Nangayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Paramananda Maharavam Shri Chaitanya Mishwaram Vancha Kalpatarubhyas Chakripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanavyo Vaishnavyo Namo. This is the appearance of an incarnation. Lord Rishabhadev, no ordinary appearance. There are many kings throughout the Bhagavatam. This is an exception, just like Lord Ramachandra is Krishna appearing as a king, again, because of the request of Maharaj Navi, not just request, that was accompanied by a slew of austerities and prayers. He appears himself as Lord Rishabhadev. And even though he knew everything, because that's the prerogative of the Supreme Lord, he knows everything, and his incarnations know everything. In this case, he abide by the system in place, which is the Varnashram Dharma. And he knew how to place himself in society. And this happened even when Krishna appeared. Krishna was a bit of an exception, as he appeared as a son of Vasudeva and Devaki, although because of the threat from Counsel and the spies and all the demons, he was transferred to Yasoda and Nanda Maharaj, and there were Vasudeva and Devaki were Kshatriyas, and Yasoda and Nanda Maharaj were Vaishyas. So he grew up pretty much as a Vaishya, but then eventually he went to Dwarka and placed himself as a Kshatriya. So the warriors of the time, those who didn't like Krishna very much, they didn't really know. I mean, they criticized Krishna even based on that. And what is he? I mean, is he a Vaishya? Is he a Kshatriya? What is it? Where is he situated? We have to place ourselves in one of these categories. Of course, it's not that one will force oneself into Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, but somewhat. First of all, because Prabhupada created this movement to create Brahmanas mostly, because you don't have to create Sudras. You don't have to start a movement to create Sudra. The world is surrounded by Sudras. And I don't say this in a pejorative way, it's simply a fact. Kalo Sudra Sambhava. In this age of Kali, everyone is a Sudra. So Prabhupada tried to churn the ocean of Sudras and get a few Brahmans out of that, because it's necessary. As we heard, every part of a body is important, but if you're missing a limb, and there are many, the VA hospitals are full of them, there are people missing limbs. They're still functioning. But if you don't have a head, it's very unlikely that you will be making any progress in any respect. So this is the first sign of a healthy society, that the head is fine and is thinking. And we see that is not happening at the moment. Well, it hasn't been happening for a while. Even 1,000 years ago. Even during the Inquisition, where was the head? People weren't thinking very well. And Middle Ages and afterwards, during the Industrial Revolution, society thought that we're going to just replace this hard work, this agrarian society. We're going to civilize it, make it industrial, so people have more time for leisure activities to cultivate higher, finer qualities. But that didn't happen. That made people more dependent on consumerism, capitalism, and their senses go wild, and also the culture went down. So it is Prabhupada wanted some Brahmins, but Prabhupada wanted thinking people, devotees to be thinking persons. He even said about his own teachings and the teachings of the Vedas that devotees should explain it in their own words, not repeat like parrots. And we could see that many took second initiation, but not all of them were qualified as Brahmins. Matter of fact, very few. Because where is this tendency to study and to reflect and to teach and to be clean and pious and organized and tolerant and have control of one's senses? It's not like, oh yeah, I like to read, I'm a Brahmin. No. What about the rest of the stuff? So Lord Rishabhadev, he grew up in a family of kshatriyas. So therefore, he situated and maintained himself as a kshatriya, even though he was the source of the instructions to the Brahmins. He's the origin of the Vedas. Still, for the sake of society, Lord Rishabhadev placed himself in one of the Varnas. And I hear a lot these days about devotees saying, I have to be situated according to, well, they don't speak personally. They say, doesn't one have to be situated according to one's nature? Yeah, but first of all, when we are talking about nature, we are talking about one's true nature, not what you think you are, but what you really are. Because we can, and I mean no disrespect at all, but when there is a dog sitting on the throne of a king and you throw a bone, the dog will jump. So what is the point of trying to fit any of us in any situation that we are not prepared or qualified to be? So this is the puzzle that, okay, you want to be acting according to your nature. We all do. But what is our true nature? And can we maintain it? It's not something as a novelty that we can, yes, I want to be a Brahmin. Now I want to be this. It's like a child that you ask them at age 4, what do you want to be? I want to be an astronaut. At age 6, I want to be a doctor. At age 9, I want to be an actor. At age 10, I want to be an influencer on YouTube. And it just keeps changing. And they're completely convinced and that's what they want. So we are sometimes like children trying to be something that we are really not. There are devotees who are Sudras, many of us, and content with that designation. It doesn't matter because we are none of it. We are spiritual souls. It's just that we have a particular nature that unless we are engaged in that nature, we will never be peaceful. And if you're not peaceful, you can't be happy. So it's pretty simple. One can, yeah, it's the same thing happens in the greater society, just as a child is born in a family of great wealth, and they want him to be a violin player and a lawyer and this and that. But the kid is only thinking about mechanical stuff, wants to fix cars and broken things, and wants to be greasy and wants to be underneath a vehicle, doesn't want to be next to a teacher practicing scales so he can become the next Paganini. This is not proper. So we have a nature, and the nature cannot be repressed. It will come out. However, this nature needs to be spiritualized, and everyone needs to hear from the Brahmins. I don't mean someone who has the uniform of a Brahmin, but someone who is truly a Brahmin, who is kind and compassionate and tolerant and humble. And these qualities will be something I will admire and hope to imbibe from others. It's very rare that someone has naturally these qualities. There are some devotees, for example, Jayananda, our first canonized saint in the movement. Prabhupada did it himself. He was a Sudra, not a Brahmin. He will be, it's not like he was enjoying giving classes and no. He was doing the most menial services and building rat carts. So this was his passion. Take the garbage out, fix the cars. And he didn't feel shame. Oh, I am not a Brahmin. And he will be humble. He will listen from the Brahmins, and he wouldn't take himself as, oh, I'm such an advanced devotee. No, he was actually teaching by example how one should behave. Regardless of one's propensities, one should be connected to the parampara via the varnashrama dharma system. And this is Chatur Varnyam Maya Shristam. This is something that Krishna himself created. So it's not subject to changes every few years, and we have to find another methodology, because Krishna knows what he's doing, and he created this system for us to be engaged, that even he himself followed, and as in the case of Maharaj Rishabhadev. So we, as a Kshatriya, one has a particular tendency, let's say, to be violent for the sake of protecting the other classes. So this violence is not foreign. Like we see some people react very drastically to violence, like no guns. I don't want to see people boxing or fighting or doing MMA. I don't want to see any of these stuff. And others, they thrive on violence. But violence in a kshatriya is used for the purpose of protecting others, or for the purpose of punishing those who try to harm others, other members of society. So the kshatriyas, they don't hesitate to use violence, and is approved and encouraged, just like Arjuna. Arjuna wanted to be a Brahman all of a sudden, wanted to be a yogi. And Krishna said, that's nonsense. What are you talking about? That's not who you are. Excuse me. Arjuna was a kshatriya. So Krishna said, you know what you're talking about. you're really lost because you're a kshatriya. You'll never be happy. You can't be a Brahmin. Vishwamitra tried because Vashishta showed him. Vishwamitra was a kshatriya and tried to steal a Kamadhenu cow from Vishwamitra from Vashishta, and Vashishta didn't have to do anything, just completely surrounded every one of his soldiers with several of his out of nowhere and basically immobilized him, made him look like a fool. So this is the power is in the Brahmins, so he wanted to be a Brahmin. And the Brahmins are the head of society. Obviously, your hand cannot dictate how you're going to think. Your foot cannot tell your head, this is what we're going to do. If the head tells the foot, go in the opposite direction, that's it. It's over. The walk goes in the direction that the head wants. So that's why the Brahmins are the head of society. They know better. And some of the qualities that they have, like for example, the Kshatriyas are very protective and they're fearless. And the Brahmins are not like that. They don't go towards violent solutions, but they don't disapprove because they know it's necessary. But they know what's best, and they don't try to. They see everything as the Lord's plan, so it's easier to be tolerant when you see Krishna's hand behind everything. And the Kshatriyas, they tend to take things a little more personally. Oh, this person is breaking the law, therefore he should be punished. So King Rishabhadev, Krishna, as Rishabhadev, he was born in a Kshatriya family. So therefore, he didn't hesitate to listen to the Brahmins, even though he was the Lord himself. And Krishna says in the Gita that if I don't work, the world will go to ruin. That's what it means. That's one of the things he means. That Krishna has to perform whatever role he appears to do. So Krishna, when he was in Dwarka, acted as a Kshatriya. When he was in Vrindavan, acted as a Vaishya. Simple as that. So where are we? What are we? We have a Brahman thread hanging from our neck. Are we really Brahmins? Are we really always engaged in trying to spread the glories of Krishna, studying the scriptures, teaching others, practicing humility and detachment? Are we? If we are, then yes, very likely that we are in the Brahman category. And if we are always engaged, trying to engage our hands and always busy and the outdoorsy type, Brahmins are not, they don't go camping, they don't grow food, they don't do any of this stuff. But if you like that activity, and it's perfectly fine, then you're probably a Vaishya. And the rest are the rest. And we are mixed. According to Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto, we are mixed classes. We are not pure. So one may find tendencies within oneself that sometimes I like to study, sometimes I like to practice martial arts, sometimes I like to grow food, and sometimes I like to fix things. And I like to, but the whole purpose of it is to serve the rest of society. So we have to find our own nature, and our nature may be difficult to pinpoint because we are mixed. We have a little bit of each class within us. So sometimes we like to do one thing, sometimes we like to do another thing. And if we feel that it is natural for us to do things that way. So there's nothing wrong with that. So it may be hard to find our nature when our nature is mixed. That's what I think. King Rishabhadev says, rule the people according to the system of our national dharma, which enjoins that the Brahmas instruct the Kshatriyas and the Kshatriyas administer to the state through the Vaishyas and the Sudras. The Kshatriyas nowadays, the police, the army, all this is a pale reflection of a true Kshatriya. For example, I was watching a 2-minute video of the latest shooting a couple of days ago. And the person who was speaking about it said, this is a 163 mass shooting that happened in the United States since the beginning of the year. And we are in April. And there are other countries where they have a murder a year, a single killing a year. What is going on? This is very difficult to live in a society that is plagued with so much havoc. And the Kshatriyas are not really doing anything. It's pretty simple. And there are minors involved in all these, in some of the killings. In a just society, I guess you create a deterrent, which is so strong that people will not dream of, even as revenge, they wouldn't dream of doing such atrocities as the society is undergoing right now. I don't know what the solution is, but if someone who is caught killing other people for no reason other than they can't control their senses or the desire for revenge or whatever reason, it's that person, I don't know, maybe it's my Kshatriya nature coming out, but that person should be publicly beaten and then decapitated. Why not? Then if you're thinking about doing that yourself, when you see that happening to a fellow crazy person, then you will think twice about it. I think a serious deterrent will definitely work, because just going through the judicial system and the courts and lawyers and bails and someone being in prison with other degenerates, that's not going to change anything. Society will continue to deteriorate. But number of deterrents, like during King Rishabhadev's rule, there was no things like that. We will read later on in the next few verses how people didn't want anything. They had no wants. They were so well engaged and so satisfied and opulent, as they didn't need anything. They don't feel like, oh, if I had this or that, I'll be happy. No, they were satisfied. They were contented by good ruling, and they love the king. They love him. Whereas in our society, we are polarized by, we are trying, as the previous verse says, yad yada charity shrestha, whatever great men do, others follow. So, but we don't have great men doing anything. So we place them like a dog in the throne of a king. We place these lesser Shudras in the post of Kshatriyas with Brahman advisors, which are also Shudras, but lesser Shudras. And we have this tendency, we want to worship, we want to serve, we want someone to guide us, but the people are inept and corrupt. So we end up wanting a lot of things. But during Rishabhadev's ruling, nobody wanted anything because they had it they wanted. What do you give to a person? What is the gift to a person who has everything? There's no need. So the word Brahma, Prabhupada said, in the purport, means perfect knowledge of all activities. So that's what Brahmins are. They are advisors because they know the essence of things and they know how to engage others. And this knowledge is very confidentially described in the Vedic literatures. It is confidential, not to the Brahmins. They can see it clear as day, just like a doctor, someone who is trained by symptoms, they can see something that others can't. So men trained perfectly as Brahmins should know all Vedic literature, and the benefit derived from the literature should be distributed to the general populace. So that is the occupation. That's how you know you're a Brahmin, not because you like to read. It's because you assimilate the essence of what is taught, and one wants to give it to others. One wants to elevate the general populace. And for that, one needs the cooperation of the populace, because one can speak perfect knowledge, but if one doesn't have an audience, what is the point there? So, unfortunately, after 50 years of a Hare Krishna movement being in the Western world, we still have to not coerce, but pretty close, just try to bring people to the fold so they can listen, they can hear, they can have some realization, they can have some understanding of the spiritual truths which supersede any other so-called truths, which are temporary and subject to the modes of nature, which eventually will end up in disappointment. So I thought when I joined the movement, I was distributing so many books that eventually we'll get to a few years later or decades later, and it's been a few decades, and eventually people will be knocking on our doors saying, oh my God, this book's changed my life. Please teach me more. And it happens in a very small scale, but it's not happening in a global scale, which is what Prabhupada wanted. We need people to knock on our door by the thousands and say, I'm surrendering everything. Just tell me what to do. Just like when Arjuna gave up this friendship posture with Krishna. It's not that they weren't friends anymore, but he said, I'm surrendering to you. I'm done. I'm done with all this discussion. Just instruct me. Just tell me what to do, please. So this is the stage that this is what Prabhupada wanted for the planet, that they surrender to those who are Brahmins and can teach them about spiritual life. And guess what? Because of default, because sometimes it's not because of our tendencies, because of default, we have been situated in that platform that we have to be the Brahmins for everybody else. We got the knowledge. And even though you just want to, plant petunias and milk goats, you have to be teaching the thousands, the masses about the principles of spiritual life that begin with mind control, sense control, tolerance, etc. Okie dokie. I think I've exhausted my little bag of Brahminical knowledge today. So are there any comments, questions, or detractions or challenges?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hey, I thought that was a nice class. I thank you. You were mentioning I guess I was having a rhetorical question. Why we seeing so much violence, particularly in this country? It's not just the United States, of course. The whole world is in a state of advancing degradation, and let's see, problems are increasing in scale and frequency. And I can ask or wonder, why is that? And we might suggest that it's a symptom of the Kali Yuga is advancing, and its symptoms are manifested as a result. But I can remember a time earlier in my life when we didn't see these kinds of things. Frequently I see in media suggested that the problem of violence in the United States, particularly, is because easy access to firearms. That's sometimes suggested that there's just a lot of guns, which may be a factor, but of course a lot of the violence that's perpetrated is not perpetrated with firearms. But the thing that I think about, that I have noticed experience, is that in my youth, who were actually at that time, probably guns were even more than they are today. I was a baby boomer. Parents, many of them, most of them probably had served in the military, either during the Second World War or the Korean. And so I remember every household was armed. Everyone had guns mounted on the wall. Hunting was wildly popular, and young people were introduced to firearms at a very early age. I was first introduced to shooting 5 years old. And I remember that children they would have their own firearms that they would use for target shooting and sometimes for hunting. And they would bring their guns to school regularly. Young children would, they would bring their 22 rifle or whatever with them to school. And then after school, they'd go hunting. But there was never any gun violence. There was no one ever thought of shooting up a school. People were not, there were no gun on schools. Nothing of the sort ever happened. Even guns were everywhere. So what changed? That suddenly there's so much violence being perpetrated against innocent individuals. And what I think I see is that has become far less religious than it once was. Sins are gradually being abandoned. Sometimes churches are shutting down. Fewer people, according to polls, identify with any particular religion. Atheism and agnosticism increasing. In my youth, everybody was very religious. The Christian values were pretty much the underpinnings of society. Everywhere you went, those values were prevalent. People were much more God conscious. I remember as a young child, my playmates, would often talk about religious issues. They would talk about God. Sometimes we would contemplate the prospect of getting into some sort of mischief, and someone would speak up and suggest that, well, I don't think God would appreciate it if we did that. And we all knew, well, God sees everything that we do, and there was a sense people were more God conscious, and in general, there was significant crime. As far as I can see, that's what has changed in society. That the society has become significantly more godless. Kinds of ill symptoms have manifested as a result of that. And so the question is really, there can be only one solution. The real solution is to restore a condition of God consciousness. Otherwise, all kinds of legislation is really not likely to affect. There's always going to be an element in society that thinks that somehow or other they can outsmart the authorities or somehow evade the justice system. But no one can evade the and that kind of awareness is it's throughout history. It's been the singularly the most powerful means of maintaining peace and order in society. Other attempts have not really been very successful. Anyway, that was one thought that I thought I'd share.
Thank you.
Hadn't been there, it might be hard to appreciate, but honestly, I'm telling you, guns were everywhere back in the day, and nobody gave it a thought, and nobody would ever consider, misusing such a powerful tool. It was just completely out. One other thought that I meant to mention this yesterday, and I just it's Varnashram Dharma. Just to put the concept of Varnashram into perspective, because I see that sometimes devotees seem to, for lack of a better term, I guess, I kind of hung up on the concept of Varnashram. Of course, Krishna explains the system of Varnashram early in Bhagavad Gita. But the thing to understand about Bhagavad Gita is that chapter by chapter, Krishna progresses through a series of understandings. It's a gradual elevation. He'll explain one thing and then present a superior understanding to that. And ultimately, conclusion of Bhagavad Gita in the 18th chapter, where he says, Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mamikam Sharanam Vam Prabhapapebhyo Mokshayushi Asuchaha. It says Sarva Dharman. So all dharma, which Srila Prabhupada translates as religion, but elsewhere he explains that the term dharma really means more than that. Now we're referring to Varnashram as Varnashram Dharma, and when Krishna is saying Sarva Dharman Parityaja, that's what he's referring to. He's saying that all types of religiosity, because the Vedic literature describes systems of religiosity, but Varnashram is amongst those systems. He's saying abandon all of that. He's actually talking about rejecting Varnashram for a superior concept, which is to just simply surrender to him, surrender to Krishna as the topmost platform, superior to Varnashram. Varnashram is actually imperial organizational system, transcendental to that, as Lord Chaitanya explained. So, Sarva Dharma, abandoning all systems of religiosity and just simply following Krishna instructions, is actually what we're trying to cultivate. The essence of Vaishnavism, that we are simply surrendered to Krishna's will and acting on his behalf, which we understand through his representative, the spiritual master, and the cyclic chain. So that I think it's important to keep that in mind and not be with this or that situation within the system of Varnashram. As you pointed out in Kali Yuga, pretty much everyone is Shudra or less than Shudra. And to sometimes think, my nature is this or that, Brahmin or Kshatriya or whatever. For the most part, none of us really have the qualities of any qualified than that. The actual qualifications for a Brahmana or a Kshatriya are extraordinary. You don't really see that so much anymore. Pretty much there are no Kshatriyas anymore. Kshatriyas are gone. The Brahmins are extremely, extremely rare. There are some Vaishyas, and from that there's just lots of Shudras and less than Shudras. But we aren't any of those things. We are Vaishnavas, or we're trying to become Vaishnavas. And it's really what we need to focus on. The instructions to our spiritual master, regardless of any. It's 8:00, so I'll shut my mouth. Thank you again, Sarvatma Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Couple points that even though the Varnashram Dharma system is not the ultimate goal, and even Lord Chaitanya rejected it, at least didn't decry it, but told Ramananda Roy that that's a low approach, that's the beginning, but it's still our connection to the parampara, which I have to have a varna, we have to have an ashram. And as far as having guns everywhere and not being violent, I think that the societies, the prevailing winds at the time were probably a little more geared towards the mode of goodness, whereas the mode of passion and ignorance have been progressively taken over due to the influence of Kali. And now, yesterday we were in State College, and to me it was a shock. I was sitting outside looking at these very young people walking by with a bewildered look in their faces. They're actually, maybe when I was their age, when I was 18, I was just as confused and bewildered looking as they were, but they looked like lost, completely lost. And then as we drove down College Street, you can see long lines of people dressed, women dressed very scantily, where they were waiting to get into a nightclub. I mean, lines were enormous. It is a scary prospect. And yes, the guns were everywhere. Jai Shri Damodar. Even my father, who was pretty cowardly, had a gun. He never used it. He never practiced, never oiled it. I mean, the thing was rusted out, probably. You couldn't shoot a bullet without killing yourself. When I was 17, I spent nearly a year in Israel, right after the Six-Day War, and in October of 1973. And everybody, literally everybody, housewives, men, and very young people, they all had guns. And this wasn't a 22 pea shooter. These were Uzis that everybody had. And high power guns. The whole army, it was like everybody in Israel. For men, they have to spend 3 years in the army. Women have to spend 2 years. This is compulsory for everybody. And the entire country was armed to the teeth. And how many murders were there? How many school shootings? Probably none, hardly any. Why? It's probably because of education. And also, and on the point of religion that you mentioned, that religion is the what differentiates us from animals. But sometimes religion can cause, or what we call religion can cause harm, like a Spanish Inquisition, intolerance, because religion has to be accompanied by saintly qualities, not just this pseudo religion, which is kind of like a bad version of a kanishta position where you see God, but you don't see anybody else. So we have to educate people on the qualities that religion can provide if it is the right religion. Yes, ultimately people have to surrender to Krishna, but that's a long shot from Varnashram Dharma and Upadharma. So I just wanted to make those points that were dancing in my head. All right, we have said enough. At least I have said enough. Thank you very much. There is a mention by Yasudev Prabhu of a Pew Research where religion in general is increasing around the world, although it is decreasing in America. Yes, it's very easy for people to blame God, because if there was a God, there will now be injustice and all that stuff. But actually, it's not God to be blamed. We are the ones to be blamed for being victimized by the laws of nature and not doing anything to revert the situation. So just that the people are more or less religious. We have to actually, it's our duty to change this, that religion gets a good rap instead of a bad rap. And people understand that, yeah, there is no human life without true religion, which is ahaituki, apratihata, unmotivated, uninterrupted service to the lotus feet of Krishna. All right. Thank you very much to all of you for your mind control, sense control, and tolerance, especially during class. All right. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Radha Damodar, Lalita Vishaka, Nitai Gora Sundar ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.